everyone. Welcome back to Her Break Room. This podcast was created for women who are tired of carrying the invisible mental and emotional load in silence. I'm your host, Dr. Cox, and today we are diving into a topic so many of us wrestle with, but don't always talk about out loud. It's setting boundaries without guilt. And I am so excited today to have our guest on board with us. She is someone whose work I deeply respect and admire. She's a psychotherapist, a writer, and a truth teller on all things boundaries. Thank you, Tiffanie, for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for allowing us to take the time to talk about this very important topic because it affects everybody across demographics, across ages, across seasons, across genders. And I think there's a lot of buzz that is going around about boundaries, and really like to have the opportunity to clear up some things.
Fantastic. I am all there with you. That's why I'm so glad that you are here with us to talk about this topic. Let's start with the basics. When you hear the word boundaries, what does that really mean to you?
Boundaries is a word that carries so much weight. I don't believe that words are neutral, and boundaries is definitely one of those words. When I hear it, I think love and I think balance. And that's on both sides. That's for the person and the people around that person, where the boundaries are a part of the conversation or a part of the dynamic.
Love that answer. Tiffanie, you wrote a recent article called Boundaries, Buzzwords, or Blueprint. In that article, you wrote something that really stood out to me. You said that boundaries are not about keeping people out, but about keeping ourselves intact. Yes, keeping ourselves intact. Can you unpack that for us, especially for women who've been taught the opposite of that?
Absolutely. I love talking to women specifically about boundaries because there have been so many messages, implicit and explicit, that women receive about boundaries
Mm.
that create this internal conflict and make it hard for women to set boundaries. And that idea that boundaries are walls, that boundaries are barriers, that boundaries are things that keep people out or push them away or punish people just is not the truth when it comes to the actual function of boundaries, which is why when I think boundaries, I think love and I think balance. Because if I am a person and I am sharing with you about my boundaries, what I'm also saying to you is that I want to be in relationship with you and I want to share with you, communicate with you what I need to be in relationship with you and to be my best self in this relationship. And so it's not about pushing you away. It's actually about bringing you in a way that allows our relationship to stay intact, but also my self respect to stay intact, that love for self, that I am not going to overgive. I'm not going to overextend, that I am not going to self abandon or self neglect, that I'm going to care for myself while I'm also caring for our relationship because I care about our relationship and I care about how I show up in that relationship.
Wow. A lot of us know that boundaries are good for us, but that doesn't seem to make it easy to establish and set boundaries. Why do you think that setting boundaries, especially without guilt, so difficult for women who are constantly juggling caregiving, work, and emotional responsibilities?
I recently made a TikTok talking about boundaries and setting boundaries without guilt. And I said something that might be a little controversial for people who are on this boundary journey. And it's that you set boundaries with the guilt and you anticipate and you prepare for there to be guilt, but that you're willing to be curious about where that guilt is coming from because every emotion is a messenger. It's telling us something, and every emotion has a function. And when I think of guilt as an emotion, its function is to help us to course correct. It's to let us know that we have moved out of alignment with some value that we have, and we feel guilt, like I've done something that is not true to me, that is not in alignment with my character or my beliefs or how I really want to move through the world. So when a person is starting to set boundaries and they feel guilt, the initial thought is clearly this is wrong. I shouldn't set boundaries. To me, that is an opportunity to pause and say, what is the value that I'm moving against that is causing me to feel guilt when I set these boundaries? Because then you can start to uproot some of those seeds that others are more important than you, or that caring for yourself is selfish, or that always being available and never saying no makes you a good person, makes you loving, makes you more pleasant, makes you more desirable or lovable, that you can start to see what that value is that is guiding or blocking you from setting the boundary. But rather than seeing guilt as an immediate stop sign, do not enter, do not pass go and collect $200, but more of a pause, let me get curious, let me get still, let me do some internal inquiry about where this guilt is coming from. But if you are on a journey to reshape your life and have more boundaries, guilt's going to be a part of it. And if you're expecting to do it without guilt, you're going to be disappointed, my friend.
Tiffany, you hit the nail on the head. A lot of times when we do have these emotions, we try to run away from them and think that because we have them, that means that perhaps we shouldn't be doing the thing that we know is right and aligned with what we want to do. So recognizing that emotion and then being curious about it could be so key for us as we are working through boundaries. So yes, set those boundaries even if you feel guilty. Thank you so much for offering that. Let's now talk about the invisible mental and emotional load. You know, that quiet weight that so many women carry behind the scenes. We know what that weight feels like. How does unclear or unspoken boundaries make that load even heavier for some women?
If you've ever heard of the saying that good fences make good neighbors, I believe that kind of a tweak or an adjustment to that saying is good boundaries makes good relationships. But when I think about boundaries and relationship and the metaphor of fences and neighbors, I think of different types of fences. And some people can have fences around their houses that are like white picket fence that delineate the boundary line between homes, but that it's still open. There's still room for engagement. You can still converse with your neighbor across that fence, even though it's clear where their property ends and your property begins. There's also homes where the border around it could be a concrete wall, and that definitely conveys a message about whether you want people to proceed or pursue or to reach out to you. And they probably can't reach you, but you also can't reach out. Then there are invisible fences, which are specifically set for like pets, where you can't see the line until you get to it and then you get a shock. And that's how I view unclear and unspoken boundaries. People don't know that there's a line there until they cross it, but now they're getting a shock. Now they're getting a reaction from you that might be negative, that might be harsh, that might feel really disruptive or disorienting or create a rupture in the relationship because a person has crossed a line that they didn't even know was there. And while there are definitely people who know there's a line and they cross it anyway, and there's definitely a conversation we can have about that. But a lot of times there are people who are crossing lines that they don't know exist. And then they're being held accountable, as they should in some ways. They're held accountable for that violation, but they didn't know. They didn't know there was a thing. And so when we are setting boundaries, our responsibility is to share that boundary. Our responsibility is to honor that boundary and to be able to respond when that boundary gets pushed or gets crossed, but we still have to make it known that boundary is there, because if not, now we're having conflict and reactions in our relationships, or we double down and we're silent about our boundary being crossed. And then that silence turns into distance and resentment in that relationship, all without the other person even knowing what is happening.
So true. One of the things that I always say is that boundaries cannot be kept unless they're communicated. How is someone supposed to know that you have that boundary if you don't communicate it? I love that invisible fence analogy. I think that gave our listeners a really clear picture of what that looks like to have your boundaries, but you didn't tell anybody else, and now they can't see it and they don't know that it's there and they get that shock to their system. Let's get a little bit more practical. I know we talked about setting those boundaries still, even if you are feeling the guilt. What does it sound like to clearly and compassionately communicate a boundary when they do have that guilt and shame that's there?
I really see that as a parallel process, or twofold. It's how a person responds to themselves when that feeling of guilt or shame comes up and they're trying to communicate, express, or set, enforce a boundary, as well as then what that looks like when they are actually parting their lips and letting words come out. When that comes up in you, I think that there's so much richness and there's such a gift and so much power in the pause, and pausing and giving ourselves a moment to breathe, really take in that breath, and to give yourself some loving, gentle reminders that boundaries are not about keeping people away. Boundaries are about keeping our relationship intact, that this boundary is allowing me to feel safe and seen and respected and loved in this relationship, in this situation. And that's what I want for me. And that's what I want for this other person. It's reminding yourself of the why. Why is this even a boundary? What is this preserving? How is this keeping me safe, regulated, respected, feeling seen and loved, so that when we come back to our why, what we also get into is having courage to do a thing that we're scared to do because it aligns with our why. And we really believe in what it is that we're doing, which is the boundary to be set. Now, when your lips actually part, recognize that your voice may quiver, and that's okay. That's okay if your voice quivers when you're saying what you need to say, but say it anyway. And you can even preface it with saying, this is something that's important to me. And even though it's hard to say, because our relationship is important to me, I know I need to say this. And then you say the boundary. I'm not going to stay in a conversation if I'm going to be spoken to disrespectfully, or if there's going to be yelling, or if there's going to be cursing. I'm going to step away from this conversation, and we can revisit it as a later time when we can both speak to each other respectfully. That way you're saying, hey, this is something that's important. This is important to me, and you are also important to me. And I want to be my best self in this interaction. And so this is a boundary that I need, that will allow me and equip me to show up that way. And because I love me and because I love you, I'm going to speak this truth with courage. And then here's the boundary. Here's what I need. And not just what I need, but what I'm going to do. Because that is a common misconception about boundaries, is that it's about controlling someone else's behavior. And that is one of the biggest fallacies, and one of the biggest misunderstandings about boundaries, is it's not about control. It is about responsibility and what I am going to do. I'm not going to say, you can't talk to me like that, because actually, yes, they can. They can talk to you any kind of way they want to. It's, I'm not going to stay in a conversation when I'm being spoke to like, and then it's being consistent in that boundary and acting on it and honoring it and leaving the conversation if it continues along that path that is in violation or is in breach of your boundary. I tell my clients all the time, there's only one person who really needs to respect your boundary, and that is you. You are the only person really that has to respect your boundary. We want everybody else, yes, to respect our boundary, but if we aren't respecting our boundary, then it is not really a boundary.
Whew, Tiffanie. Yes. That is spot on again. Absolutely. If we're not respecting our own boundary, how can we expect other people to do that? Those examples that you just gave about how you can speak those boundaries, I think that can be so helpful to so many people that are listening because we can clearly state what that boundary is. And I love the part that you said that even if your lips are quivering, you can still go ahead and say it. You often say that relationships are co created, and I love that. How can women who've been over functioning or hyper independent begin to co create healthier dynamics at home, at work, or even in their community?
That co-creation is something that I do speak about a lot because I want people to really have agency. That one of our core needs is autonomy, agency, and independence. And we want to have a say in the way our life unfolds, in the way our relationships are managed. We want to have a say. And when we don't have a say, when we lack autonomy or we feel powerless, that leads to a whole host of things. And so by reinforcing or reminding people that relationships are co created, it also allows people to take some ownership of if you're unhappy in your relationship, what are you going to do to change that, to shift that? And there's shifting that happens in the relationship. And in some situations, there's shifting yourself out of the relationship. If you've done all the shifting you can in it and there hasn't been the change that you desire to see, then you have to take a big breath and determine if you need to shift out of that relationship. But in that co creation, it's letting women know that we do teach people how to treat us by what we allow, by what we tolerate, by what we ignore, and by what we address. And that's not nagging, that's not being difficult, that's not being too much. That's saying, yeah, this is what I like, and this is what I need. And it's not easy. None of this is easy. Like, even though we're having a conversation and we are exchanging words and thoughts, in practice, I understand that it's not easy. I think of it as if you've ever gone to get a service performed, like you've gotten your nails done or you've gotten your hair done. And so somebody is taking what you said you wanted and they're providing a service for you. But hopefully at some point during that service, they'll say, is this the shape of the nail that you want? Is this the color that you like? How's this length? Or they'll kind of check in with you. And that's because they want you to be satisfied with the service. They want you to be satisfied with the outcome. But then we have to speak up and say, oh, no, I actually would like it to be shaped this way. Or, oh, that color is a little bit too pink for me. Can we try this? Or, yeah, this was my vision. And can we make this shift or this tweak to be able to say what it is that we need so that when we walk away, we are satisfied, we are fulfilled, that we got our need met.
Mm.
And though that is a very like one-dimensional example, it's bringing that back to the relationship is I'm giving feedback to my partner, I'm giving feedback to my friend, I'm giving feedback to the person that I'm in relationship with about what again I need and how I would like to be treated, how I would like to feel in this relationship. So that gives them an opportunity to adjust or to meet those needs or to be honest and say, oh, I actually am not able to do that for you. And then you can make a decision about what you do with that information. So it's really about empowering people to speak up and to seek what they need and to create what they want to design their life using their voice and having that agency to co-create the relationship that they're in.
If you believe that I actually have this agency, that I have this power to create the type of relationships that I want, whether it be at home, at work, or in your community, anywhere that you're at, that can give you so much empowerment. That could be such a great way for us to even unload some of this weight that we're carrying when we tell people what it is that we want. then that can lessen some of the burden perhaps that we have. Think about at work. If your boss gives you an assignment and it's one that's like too much for the deadline that you have, you can still communicate that in a respectful way.
I love that example, communicating that with like in a workplace situation. And it could be across any dynamic that when we are empowered to speak up, we're not just saying yes or no. Like our boundaries are just not saying, yes, I'm going to do that, or no, I'm not going to do that. Our boundaries are also communicating our capacity and our limitations and what we can actually invest in a situation. And that's helpful so that the other person knows if there's an adjustment that needs to be made on their end. Because if we're in a relationship that's co-created, it's not just I am responsible for all of this. They have some responsibility too. They have some ownership too. And if we are in a relationship where we want to be collaborative, then they want to know what's going on with me, just like I want to know what's going on with them. And if I
Absolutely.
can practice saying what I need, that also prepares me to hear what other people need
Ooh,
and to be able to create and make space for other people as well. That this is not just one sided. This is not just, I've discovered that I need to have boundaries and I'm going to communicate them to the people in my life. And that's where the story ends. No, it's a back and forth. It's a dialogue. There's mutual care involved with boundaries. And so if I have boundaries, guess what? So does my spouse. So do my children. Boundaries is something that I absolutely talk about with parents who have kids, because that's where some of that we talk about before, the question of like where that comes from, why women have issues or feel guilty setting boundaries. It's because when they were kids, for some of them, they were taught directly or indirectly that as a child, you don't have boundaries. You don't have a voice. You don't have privacy. Nothing in this house is yours because you are a child. You don't have a say. You don't have autonomy. You don't have agency because you're a child. And then miraculously, people are supposed to be 18, 19 years old in relationships, in jobs, and now set boundaries and have a voice and be assertive when for the previous 18 years they didn't. Something's not mapping here.
yeah, that math is not math. Absolutely. Great points. What do you think for women that are listening who's just beginning this journey of setting boundaries? What is one small, doable step that she can take today to start setting a boundary?
Start listening to your body, because the boundaries that you need to set are usually unspoken from your body first. That these boundaries don't occur just in your prefrontal cortex, in the cognitive part of your brain, that boundaries originate in your body. I am a queen of metaphors. So another metaphor, I believe that we are born with boundaries. And I use the image or the illustration of a baby who doesn't have like verbal language and whose brain is very much still developing. But you try to give that baby some food that baby doesn't want. That baby's like, or you try to pick up that baby and that baby is like a toddler and they don't want, they're squirming and they're pushing you away. Their body is conveying their boundary. And it is over the lifespan of children that they are taught, whether it's the parent's intention or not, to override their body and override their own boundaries for the sake and the comfort of other people. And then when they become adult and they see the wreckage left in the wake of a boundaryless life, whether it's burnout, it's overgiving, it's dependency or codependency in a relationship, it's chronic irritability or chronic busyness, when they see that wake and they're like, I got to do something. Not only are they trying to learn how to set boundaries, they're trying to unlearn all the things that they had done to disconnect from their bodies and disconnect from the natural rhythm of the boundaries that need to be set. And so I would tell women, start to get back into your body, start to notice what it feels like to say no, what it feels like to say yes. So when somebody presents you with a opportunity or a request and you're about to respond, go ahead, respond however you typically respond. Say yes. I've told you before, as my friend and my colleague, that I have been reckless with my yeses and that I have to be mindful of where I'm doling up these yeses because yeses are currency and I don't want to be misinvesting my yeses. But I invite people to notice what it feels like in their body when they say yes. And is it a yes that they feel like, oh, yeah, I feel aligned with that. I feel drawn to that versus a, yeah, okay, yeah, I could do that. Where it feels like a burden. It feels like a weight. It feels like what's happening. Or when I say no, do I feel like, no, I can't do that? Or is there a relief of like, no, yeah, I'm not able to do that? To learn and to notice how your body responds to that, to reconnect with your body so that as you are starting to communicate your boundaries, your body is on board with it. And even when your body is, again, feels guilty, feels anxious with saying no or expressing a boundary, that's where you take that pause. That's where you check in with yourself to see kind of where that is coming from, where that string is leading to, but that you still connect with your body and that you recognize that boundaries are not about perfection. It's something that you're practicing and it doesn't have to be perfect, but you do want it to be consistent. You do want to recognize the need and be consistent with enforcing it and honoring it. And even if you don't do it in one instance and then later you're like, oh, I overstepped my boundary, that you can always circle back and say, you know what, I said yes to that thing and I really am not ever going to actually be able to show up for that. So thank you for thinking of me. Maybe next time, or I'll let you know when I'm available in the future, that you can always come back around.
Mhm. Yes, 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 yes. I love what you said about the body because I often say the body keeps the score. Our body is always giving us messages. What I notice with folks, and I have even noticed with myself, in order to listen to the body or tap into the body, we first have to take that pause. We have to take that breath. We have to be able to just regulate ourselves in a moment for a moment so that we can tap into our bodies to see what signals our bodies are giving us. And having that be a guiding post for your boundaries, I think it's phenomenal. So thank you for offering that tidbit to folks. Okay, Tiffany, well, let's be honest. Not everybody is going to clap for our boundaries. Not everyone is going to be like, all right, great. I'm glad you set that boundary. I'll honor it. So, how can women deal with that pushback or that discomfort that often comes when people are used to the old version of them as they're trying to set those boundaries? What do you think?
They can name it. That when we name something, we are more effective at addressing it. And if we have showed up in relationship in such a way where we were often saying yes, or we were always available, or we overfunctioned, overextended, overgave, that's what people are used to. So then when you start to shift into a more boundaried state, people are going to be like taken aback by that because when you set a boundary, it almost requires the other person to adjust. If they're used to being this close to you and then you set a boundary that they can't be that close, now they have to set back. The reason I suspect that people get pushback on their boundaries is, especially in the beginning, is because the pendulum sometimes swings a little bit far. That people go from being completely without boundaries, yes to everything, always available, whatever you need, I got you. And then they're like, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm going to start setting boundaries. And now they are like a brick wall. No one gets to get entry into this. Everything is a no. Everything is, I can't do that. I can't come. I'm not available. So people understandably are like disoriented, like, what? Like there wasn't even a lead up to this. There wasn't a conversation. There wasn't anything. So when a person is setting boundaries and they get that pushback, name that and be able to say, I just shared with you what I was able to give, what I was able to offer, how I was able to show up based on this request that you've asked me. And I'm noticing some resistance. So tell me what that's about for you. So that then the person can say, because I really need this. Like I'm really at a crucial point and you're the only person who can help me with this thing, whatever the thing is. And to be able to say, I hear that and I can see that's frustrating for you. And I want you to have what you need. And I also need to honor what I need. And so in this particular situation, I can't show up for you the way that I've showed up for you before. And I understand that's different. And it's something that I'm practicing and it is hard for me to do, but I know that it's important for me to do. And so I hope that you can respect this. And if you can't, I understand. I still can't do X, or my answer is still no, or my boundary is still whatever my boundary is still. That you name it, that you can validate the other person confusion or frustration or disappointment because their feelings are valid too, because there was a unspoken agreement that you and that person had that you would always say yes and always be available and be the go-to person and pick up all the slack and stand in the gaps. And now you're changing that agreement without them agreeing to it. So you can name that like, yeah, I'm changing that agreement. And that might have our relationship look different. And because our relationship is co-created, let's talk about it, recognizing that if I'm setting this boundary, it's still going to be my boundary, but we can talk about like how our relationship is going to adjust and adapt to me being more boundaried. But name it, validate the uncomfortable feelings that you're having and that the other person is having.
Yes, that's that name it to tame it. We got to name it to tame it. We got to say what it is. And that in itself can relieve some of the discomfort that we're having around setting those boundaries. And also back to just communicating it clearly to the person that you are co-creating this relationship with. So giving it that name, letting them know what's happening, understanding what's happening within you, what's coming up within you. And that can help settle down a lot of these feelings that we're having as well. Name it, ladies. Let's name it. All right. So finally, if you could leave our listeners with just one truth about boundaries that you wish every woman knew, what would that be?
Well, it's coming back to like where I started, that boundaries are love. Boundaries are loving. And I really want to reframe this idea of boundaries because, again, boundaries get a bad rap. Boundaries get seen as ways to control other people, as ways to punish other people, or to keep people out. And there's absolutely people who are using the term boundary to describe their behavior, and they are punishing people and they are pushing people away and they are keeping people out. But at the core of it, that I really believe that boundary is about love. It's about love for self and it's about love for others. And by loving others, I want to resist any urge or remove any seeds that can create resentment because resentment deteriorates relationships in such an insidious way. And not having boundaries, not speaking about boundaries, not naming things, not repairing things or addressing things, all become seeds that grow into fields of resentment. And if you can see boundaries as an act of love for yourself and for other people, then it becomes just a part of your movement. It's, again, how you say, I want to be in a relationship with you. And I want to feel safe in this relationship. And I want to feel respected in this relationship. And I want to feel loved in this relationship. And here are the things that will help me to experience that in this relationship with you that I want to have. And oh, by the way, I want you to feel that way with me. And so I want you to tell me about your boundaries too. I want you to tell me what you need. I want you to share with me the instruction manual of how to love you so that I can do it well and I can do it right.
Oh, that is so beautiful, Tiffany. That love. Oh my goodness. Yes. It's like we're giving boundaries a new way of people perceiving it, a new way of people defining it. Instead of it being this hard, rigid thing, it could be a source of love for ourselves and for others. Tiffanie, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, your warmth, and your voice with us today. I think this conversation was so powerful, and I know it's going to help so many women feel seen, supported, and empowered to reclaim their time, their energy, their peace, and their purpose, and to set those boundaries in love. To all of our listeners, I want you guys to all remember that boundaries are not selfish. And as Tiffanie said, they're an act of love. They're sacred and they're something that we can treasure. It's probably not one of the most comfortable things that, we do, but it's still one of those things that we need to do because it does help us to protect our mind, our body, our spirits, and our souls. So until next time, take care of yourself, be well, and don't forget to breathe.